from September to February, I was struggling so much. I was struggling to stay consistent with my progress, to stay consistent with being stoic, with my diet, with even things like my fitness, which I have always loved fitness. I've always loved going to the gym. But during this period, there were times where I would just listen to the desire to not go. In short, I was doing everything wrong. And the reason it lasted for 6 months was not because it was like super difficult to turn myself around. It was super difficult to find out what to do. Because realistically, when you make a mistake, it's it's all on you. Like there's no external thing you have to change. It's outside of your control. There's no like super complex thing you have to do. When you make a mistake, when you know what you have to be doing and you don't do it, you simply do the thing that you know you have to do, right? It would seem like after one day of indulging, the next day you stop because you already know what to do. You made the mistake and you're not going to make it again. But see, there's a force in our own minds, in our own conscious, called the enemy. And the enemy is essentially the fixed mindset version of us. It's the version of us that says all the negative thoughts. It's the version of us that says we can't do something, that says we're incapable. And every time I would make a mistake, every time I would be trying to get back on a self-improvement, the enemy would sneak up and say, this isn't you. I would sit down to record a video like this, and then I would get thoughts in my head saying, you're a hypocrite. You don't practice what you preach. You need to get it together, man. You're a fraud. What gives you the right to tell these people what to do when you don't know yourself? And now these statements had some merit to them because I'm not experienced in everything. So of course, it's very important that I'm not just going to sit here and say anything to the camera and then post it if I don't have experience with that thing. But this was happening even with the things that I did have experience with. Even the things that I did know, even the things that I have experienced, my mind would create doubt. Excuse me. I would fall into this spiral of self-doubt and negative self-talk. And then that leads to inaction. That leads to not believing in yourself. Not to mention, every time that I would mess up, every time that I would make a mistake, instead of moving on from it, because I thought that this mistake represented me as a human, because I felt like when I failed as a person, I would stay fixated on this failure for hours at a time. And the next day, the enemy would use my past experience to say, oh no, this isn't you. For example, one time I had watched entertainment in literally the middle of the day. It's still sun out. I was watching YouTube, some fucking, I don't know, Markiplier. And that mistake affected me so much that I literally spent the next 3 hours getting pissed, journaling, oh man, I'm such a fucking idiot. All this negative self-talk. 3 hours in that loop. It was in February when I contacted one of my mentors for something completely unrelated. And then we get to, I was asking him how he was doing. And then the conversation gets to how I'm doing. And I tell him, well, honestly, it's going kind of rocky, but I'll figure it out. He asks me what I'm going to do about it. I tell him, I don't really have a plan. I'm just figuring it out as I go. He first asks me why I don't have a plan, to which I respond, well, it just feels like I'm so much farther behind than where I should be. Feels like I'm not making enough progress. Feels like I'm doing everything wrong. And that's when he sends me like a chain of text messages, all with his advice. And there are a few things that are noteworthy to mention. Like, he told me that I can't focus on my failures because focusing on my failures is going to derail me from being present. That I'm not actually farther behind than I was before. That I'm right where I need to be. Things like that. But the most important text that he sent, the one that had the most impact on me, was, recognize that you deviated and get back to work. The whole reason that I had spent 6 months in this like negative, inconsistent spiral, the reason I was seemingly stuck in this chasm was because every single day that I would try to look forward, I would listen to the negative self-talk, turn my head and look backward. Every day I was focused on who I was yesterday. If I failed yesterday, I can't succeed today. That was my logic. My logic was, if you didn't do good yesterday, what makes you think that you're going to do good today? And the enemy is strong. It really it gives you a good story. It knows how to convince you. And so, for 6 months, it was only because I had been focusing on yesterday, because I had been fixating on who I was previously, that I couldn't move forward. And I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, I couldn't move forward because my head is still stuck in yesterday. I'm not present. Every time I would fail, I would let the 20 minutes that I spent indulging represent me as a person, and then I'd spend 3 hours doing nothing but complaining and getting frustrated, when that actually made me more of a hypocrite. Because my whole philosophy is, self-control, you don't need to let your emotions consume you. And here I was, I indulged for 20 minutes. Instead of moving on and then focusing on being productive again, I would spend like literally the next half of the day sitting there. You're such an idiot, bro. You're so dumb. How could you do this? You're a failure. You're a hypocrite. All this shit. It's like, if you want to use your failures as a stepping stone, as so many successful people say, like, failure is a stepping stone, you need to detach your own identity from that failure, and you need to forget about what you did yesterday. You need to forget about who you were the day before. Yesterday, I made some mistakes. Now, I'm aware of what those mistakes were, and I'm not going to make them again, because I know what they are, and they're in my control to prevent. I am no longer letting that failure identify me the way I used to let it, because I've seen what happens when you do. I've experienced what happens when you do. You spend half a year doing nothing but complaining, but failing. Because, if you think you're a failure, if you think that that's who you are, of course you're going to be that. Of course your actions are going to represent that. But if you are able to forget yesterday, if you're able to fail miserably, and then the next day move on and try again, that's all you need. That really is all you need. It's like my mentor said, recognize that you deviated and get back to work. There is no reason to stall once you've made a mistake and you're aware of what you need to be doing and what you don't need to be doing. And even if the mistakes you're making are things that you could prevent, that you're simply like not resisting enough, which was in my case, not resisting entertainment, even though I knew I shouldn't be consuming it, even then, that failure, that indulgence does not represent you. It does not represent your identity as a person. It does not represent your future success. It is only your actions that represent not even represent what's going to happen in your future, but they're the only things that give you somewhat of an idea of where you're headed in life. Because life is unpredictable. There is no way we can quantify who you're going to be in 10 years. But if you use your failure as something to propel you forward, rather than something as like a marker of who you are, I'd say you're going to be in a pretty good place. And I'll say it again before I close this video off. Recognize that you deviated and get back to work. That's all for this video, guys. Have a good day.